On this episode of the Surviving Outside Sales podcast, I sit down with one of my close friends, former college roommate and teammate, Brendan Harris. Brendan was an 8-year veteran in Major League Baseball, but has carved out quite an after baseball career for him. We talk about what his process and his plans were. Even before he started playing Major League Baseball, he knew he was going to have an executive career afterwards. We discussed that and more on this episode. So please listen. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, shoot us a comment. Let us know what you think about the Surviving Outside Sales podcast and more. Now let's get to it. On with the show. Intro. The Surviving Outside Sales podcast, hosted by Mike O'Kelly, presented by Rithm AI. The goal is to get in, dominate, then get out. Surviving Outside Sales. Now on with the show. Our guest today is a very good friend of mine. We met back in college. He was one of my teammates and eventually one of my roommates at William & Mary, Mr. Brendan Harris. Brendan, great to see you.
Mike, great to be here.
Yeah. Brendan is Director of Athletic Development at X10 Capital. Brendan had a very successful Major League Baseball career. He was on 5 opening day rosters and parts of 8 different seasons, 33 career home runs, which I'm very, very jealous of. That's a lot of home runs in the big leagues, and was a very successful baseball player, but has carved out a very successful career afterwards, all because he came up with a plan. And so that's what we want to talk about today. So Brendan, let's go back. Let's start to where it all began, which was William. Your goal growing
Life
up was
began.
Yes. Well, between us. I mean, that's where we met. Brendan was 1 year younger than me and a very highly recruited player out of New York, Syracuse. Was that right?
Albany area, just north of Albany.
Okay.
Queensbury, New York.
Gotcha. All right. So you're a highly recruited player. We heard about you. This shortstop was coming in, which is great because our shortstop, Ronnie Bush, was graduating and we needed a guy. So Brendan started his career. So, I mean, I had dreams of playing in the big leagues, and I'm sure a lot of guys did. I know a lot of guys in our team did. That was one of your dreams, correct? Was playing in the big leagues?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you grow up playing, you're like, oh, this is really cool to be able to play Division I. And then throughout the whole baseball experience, whether, if you go all the way back from Little League, you just keep trying to, if it were a video game, trying to get to the next level, next board, right? We had good Little League teams where we just missed, the regionals that would go to Williamsport. Then I wanted to make the varsity as a freshman. And then, eventually I wanted to play Division I. Then I wanted to be a, starter, and then wanted to get drafted. And then I was like, oh, this is an interesting experience. I was like, I keep moving up. Then you get to AA and you're like, wait a minute, I might get a chance to knock on the door here. And then you do that and you get a couple cups of coffee, and then you start to get a little bit more comfortable in your own skin and your surroundings, and think, all right, I might be able to, figure out a way to stay here and make a little bit of a career out of it. So yeah, it was the type of thing where you always wanted to play. You don't know if it's possible. And so you just keep working and like I said, trying to advance to the next level and see what happens.
Yeah. And so if you're listening right now, you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what does this have to do with outside sales? Well, we're going to get to that because Brendan was very smart, and Brendan had a plan. And that plan was not just play baseball, make a ton of money, and then sit on his butt for the rest of his life. And so we'll go into that in a little bit. So I remember you got called up, Brendan, to the Cubs, and you played in Wrigley Field. Talk about that, and then talk about being in a massive trade. I think it was the Nomar Garcia-Parra trade, correct? Talk about how you're like you said, you're fighting. You get to the big leagues with the Chicago Cubs. You're in Wrigley Field. You've made it. And then it was just days or a couple weeks later, you get traded. Talk about how you had a plan, you executed your plan, and then your plan changed without your input. Talk about what happened, and then your thought process, how you kind of bounced back and conceptualize that, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, it's your first peek into the really business side of the game, where I was in spring training with these guys. Many of these guys I've come up through the minors with, who are starting to break in and establish themselves, and then get called up, and it's a great experience. And my first game, I'll never forget, first game I was there was the Cubs White Sox. So it was like an interleague, and it was just, I remember getting and catching the first pitch, which they make most of the rookies do. and just looking out and seeing people on rooftops as far as the eye could see. And it was kind of, deer in the headlights moment. And so the team was pretty veteran heavy in terms of the guys on that team. And, with Sosa was still there, Lou was still there, Ramos Ramirez, Derek Lee, Wood, Pryor, Maddox, all those guys. And so you think, all right, well, payroll is pretty expansive or pretty substantial here. So they're going to need some younger guys, pre-arbitration guys and the rookie wage that to fill in and fill out the roster. So I saw an opportunity. I thought, hey, I might be the second baseman there, in the year or two after. Like I said, they made the trade for Nomar. They, were really going for it. This is a year after the Bartman thing. And so you think you have, as I said, every time you get comfortable, things change, and you don't want to get stuck in that kind of immobile or unadaptable rut. And so I had just gotten sent down to AAA a couple days before, right before the deadline, and they needed some pitching. And so I get my AAA manager calls me in the office. He says, "You're traded." And this is pre, Twitter and in the explosion of social media. And he literally tells me, "You're traded. It's a big 14 deal." He goes, "I'm sorry to tell you, I don't know which one you're going to." and I was like, all right, I'll just go. I'll pack my stuff and have a Coke and a smile over here in the corner, while you guys get back to me.
Wow.
And so, the rug's pulled out to an extent. You got to kind of say some goodbye to these guys, which ironically, the Expos, the team I went to, was a week later was playing the Cubs. And so I'm like, just going to the opposite clubhouse 6 days later. But then it's just you got to roll with the punches, and it was just stay adaptable. I was in a new organization, which it's a mindset, it's a new opportunity at the same time, and somebody traded you, but somebody also wanted you. So then you just kind of keep doing what you're doing and take stay with the same routine and the same plan and try to execute in a way that creates a competitive advantage or niche for you to play and operate in the major leagues with success, so that the team's going to want to commit to you and give you more playing time and whatnot. So that was the process. That it was a complete mess. The Expos at the time, that it was owned by Major League Baseball. It was there's a lot of uncertainty on whether they were going to move. But for me, it was another thing where I couldn't control any of that. So I could just control the effort and the plan and approach that I came to the field with each day. And now that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, and that's a great story, because what I want to illustrate from that, and for all the listeners that are in sales, high performers out there, as much as we would like to think that companies have our best interest and they really care about us as individuals and our career path, any kind of moment where it's good for the budget, like you mentioned, the Cubs had a high payroll and they had to dump salaries. And how many times have you seen it in sports? And I think sports is a great mirroring of the sales industry. A lot of athletes go into sales, and the business aspect of it, especially at the professional level, which I didn't get the same experience you did. You obviously got to the pinnacle of the professional sports, and I was down at the bottom of the minor leagues. It did look a lot like the movie Major League, with the broken down bus and dust infields and and rocks in the batter's box. But we've talked before about the cutthroat nature of sports. Really, is the same could be said for business. And so I'm bringing it full circle of, I said in the beginning, Brendan had a plan for life after baseball, and he was even executing this in college. So Brendan's story is kind of an awakening to think, okay, where do I stand today? Where did I stand yesterday? And where am I going to stand in the future? So always be thinking about those types of things as we go forward. But I want to go back to college, because Brendan and I played on a championship team, 2001. We won the conference. So before Brendan got to William & Mary, I was there a year earlier, and we were terrible. So I guess Brendan was the savior, but no, I think we won 3 conference games. It might be 3 or 4 conference games out of 21. I think we were 3-18. We were the laughing stock of the conference. I don't know. I guess we just had some guys maybe got drunk the night before and came out to the field and didn't play well. I have no idea, but we were last in the conference. We easily exited the conference tournament. And I remember one of the reasons why I went to William & Mary was because an opportunity to play as a freshman. And I got that opportunity about halfway through the season due to a string of injuries. And one of the things that I told the head coach and the assistant coach that left right after Brendan got to campus was, I want to bring a conference championship to the school. That's what I want to do before I leave. And so Brendan, myself, Steve Booker, Matt Kirby, a bunch of other guys became a core nucleus of success at that school. And we won a conference championship. And, after the senior year, which was your junior year, Brendan gets drafted in the 5th round of the Major League Draft to the Chicago Cubs. I knew a lot of guys and actually played with some guys that were drafted 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round with the Braves. I was signed as a free agent, so I was not drafted. And so these guys that were drafted, the way they talked was like they made it. And we're in Danville, Virginia, Brendan, and this tiny little town. And I played against some big time players. I played Brian Pena was our catcher. He played in the big leagues for several years, several teams. I played against Joe Mauer. I played against David Wright, the third baseman for the Mets. Was it David Wright? Yeah. Played against David Wright. Rick Ankiel pitched in our league. He was sent down after that disastrous NLCS. There were some big names. So the guys around where you were drafted, they thought they made it already. And so it was the mentality of, okay, I'm here. That was my goal. And so honestly, it's not like I fed into it, but I thought, okay, I'm in the organization. Okay, I'll have a good off season. I'll train and I'll come back to spring training and see if I can make a ball club somewhere. Well, guess what? I was cut. They let me go. I didn't get that opportunity. And I thought I was going to get it, and it didn't happen. And so I had a very early wake-up call that, you know what, just because you have an opportunity does not mean you're going to continue to have that opportunity. But some of the guys were just shocked, like around where Brendan got drafted, that were cut. And it was because Time Warner had purchased the Braves from Ted Turner's group. The new business came in, and the first thing they did was they got rid of 90 ball players right off the top. And they got rid of 3 teams. And so I realized at the beginning, you always have to have that backup plan because things can happen very quickly and big decisions are made when you're not in the room. So Brendan comes back to campus, and I remember we had a conversation. You probably don't remember this, but it really stuck with me. We were out at a party on a Saturday night, and people were kind of asking you questions about, was it Daytona? Is that where you went?
Yeah, my first season, yes.
Yeah, it was Daytona.
And then West Tennessee, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're asking you about Daytona. And I remember you said something. You were like, guys, I haven't made it yet. Because guys were just, not many guys, for your audience, not many guys from William & Mary made it to the big leagues or made it very far in pro ball until Brendan. We had like Curtis Pride, who played for the Indians, was one guy. But other than that, there were not a lot of guys that made it. And so guys were just super excited. And you were like, guys, I haven't made it yet. Just pump the brakes. Yeah, it's great. Thank you. But the humbleness that you had when you could have been super cocky and super arrogant. And I remember thinking like, man, Brendan was the conference player of the year, I think, right? You're the conference player of the year, All-American. Were you second or third team All-American? Something like that?
Third team, yeah.
Third team All-American, conference player of the year, set numerous records at William & Mary. In fact, you broke my single season RBI record. That's okay. Records are meant to be broken. I was clinging to a couple of them and they were broken, but Brendan could have been super arrogant, and he did. He stayed humble, and he realized my goal was not to just hit one level. It was to continue to push. And so at that moment, it really kind of dawned on me, and it really kind of changed my trajectory. Now, I had already been released by the Braves. And so I had already started to make a plan for my life because I thought to myself, okay, I was at A-ball. I'm 23 years old. I batted 200. I was on a horrible slump at the end of the year. Physically, I was exhausted. My bat was slow. I didn't know how to adjust when your body wasn't 100%. And so I realized really quickly, I have to have a backup plan. I still played the next summer in independent ball, and then I was done. And so I had to come up with that plan very quickly. But you graduate. And remind me, did you go straight to business school, or were you doing that in the off seasons, or did you do that right after you were done with your career?
That was right after I was done.
Okay.
Yeah, I only got done with that a couple of years ago.
Gotcha. Okay.
That was 16 and 18. So
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the point you're touching on, and these guys that you played with in Danville that thought they made it, and a lot of times your goals and expectations, if they're not high enough, they can be limiting. And so I had a, hey, I want to do this, and yeah, I had a, I want to be an all-star in this league in A ball, high A, but I also want to move up. So I don't care if I'm an all-star as long as I play well enough to move up. And the goal was kind of move up, but also just let's see what happens. And I think sometimes people don't set their expectations or their goals high enough, and they become inherently limiting. And there was an interesting story for that year where I had this hitting coach. His name was Leon Lee. He was actually Derek Lee's father. Phenomenal guy. One of the best hitting coaches, but one of the best guys baseball guys I was ever around. Had a long career in Japan. So I would kind of fluctuate between 295 and 305, throughout for the year. I got off to a slow start. I kind of got hurt, and then I had a great June, and then we get into July, and from July there was 3 weeks where I just waffle between 295 and 305. And he goes, when are you just going to say, hey, I want to lead the league in hitting and hit 330? It's almost like you think to yourself, 300 is what I should do. I remember thinking, yeah, you're right. Why don't I hit 330? Then I got hot again, and I got up to 329, and I was second in the league in hitting. And I ended up getting moved up to double A, but I was like, man, my mindset was just I was comfortable, and I thought 300 was good and enough to get me up and that just kind of limited me, because there would be, I'd get up to 305 and I'd be like, oh, I'm playing with house money, when I really, when I'd throw at bat. So it was for me a mindset that I in a good lesson to just be aggressive, be diligent in terms of what you want to do in your plan, but also be a little bit adaptable to the unknown, because I think this is what I had a plan, but obviously you got to kind of roll with the punches sometimes. And sometimes you might have to learn another position, and sometimes, or do a different skill set to be able to get where you want. So if you don't have any adaptability, you're going to be inherently at a disadvantage. And the other aspect was baseball, at least. I mean, maybe I got lucky where in high A at that point, there was, Jose Reyes was there, Miguel Cabrera was there, Euclid was there, CJ Wilson, there was some Alex Rios, there were some marquee players in the league. Teixeira was in the league for a little bit. He moved right up, and so, I had seen what would be all-star level players were, and I had to kind of level up, and it was humbling to see some of the tools that you're going up against. I remember back in the day, and people forget he came up with the Rangers, but I don't know what type of weightlifting program the Rangers had back in the day, but every guy seemed to roll out and be 60, 225, It
was called steroids.
And seeing some, the flesh, the specimens that you're going against will kind of keep you humble. So, but at the same time, I mean, that's what kind of keeps you hungry. So that was kind of the mindset I had.
It's a great mindset, and it transcends any industry, whether it's baseball, sports, basketball, if it's sales, it doesn't matter. And one of the things I remember, so the assistant coach at William Mary that left when Brendan was there, his name's John Cole. And he said something that has stuck with me to this day. He said, somebody somewhere in the rest of the world is outworking you today. What are you going to do about it? The same can be said when it comes to competition in sales, because I want to bring this back to sales. The one thing when people always say, well, when conversations happen is, well, who's my competition? And my answer is everyone. It doesn't matter what you sell. Your competition is every other factor that's going on. Your client, your competition might be their budget. Because if they need to buy something from you, it doesn't matter if they are going to buy something in your class or your style of product, they're spending dollars somewhere else. So your competition is every single person that is out there every single day. Just like there are kids in other parts of the world that are playing baseball right now, and they've been playing baseball since 7:30 in the morning, all day. Hands are probably raw, maybe even bloodied. I don't know if you want to expand your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I did play winter ball in the Dominican one time, and there's a scout who he said, "Hey," he says, "come to this area." He goes, I want to make some tweaks to your swing." So I went there. It was after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, so it wasn't summer. So school should have been in session.
Mm-hmm.
And then so we go to this big area, and there was like 4 full fields full of like people playing all day. And I was just like, these guys are hungry. Yeah. And I was like, you're kind of a little bit of a disservice. I was like, shouldn't these guys be in some school, have some school at least, but yeah, in terms of the competition, in terms of how I looked at it, I look at it a little bit differently, where my competition is what I did was me yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And I could control what I can control. Now, I'm aware of my competition. It's certainly in your best interest to be. I mean, certainly I love to watch great hitters. I used to watch like film each day of myself and the pitcher. And then when I was in Liver Rut, I'd watch David Wright's ABs, just watch his rhythm. And he had been fantastic mechanics and rhythm at the plate, and his bat was in the zone obviously the results speaking of themselves and the career he had. But so, I was aware of the competition out there. And so far as that, I could learn things and add to my game from there. But in terms of what I brought each day, it was, bringing my best and relative to what I was able to do yesterday and what I'm going to do tomorrow. And so that was my focus. And that gives you a sense of control, and security when you feel like, the results and the outcome is eventually you have a hand in it. And nothing is predetermined, in that you're kind of, handcuffed. I've told the story a number of times where one of probably the best manager I played for was Joe Madden. And in Tampa, he had and he still does it to this day, he has individual meetings. And so at the time it happened, I didn't know later how innovative and how rare it was, where you had individual meetings with you and the GM. And so now I've heard, Andrew Friedman was the GM and Joe was it. Now I've heard that some of the individuals, they bring in, some data guys, and will show, can bring in show data to kind of supplement the scouting report and say, listen, this is what you really do well. This is what we're looking for you to do. This is your role on this. And so they sit you down and they say, hey, listen, this is a scouting report on you. This is your opportunity to make the team. If this and this happen, you'll make the team. And then if this happens, the more you hit, you're going to play. You show you can handle this or you can handle that, but ultimately, like, the decision and these results will be in your hands. And I remember walking out of there like flying, where I'm like, I have control. Because some of the previous stops I'd been, whether it was Washington with Jim Bowden, and he's like, well, I signed too many guys, you're going to go to AAA, and I was like, so you're not letting any competition sort itself out, or anybody win the opportunity. It's predetermined based on your kind of odd metrics and way of signing people and constructing rosters. So being able to be in control of what you have in front of you was a very freeing thing in baseball. As you know, it's pretty uncommon in baseball, which is an odd thing to be able to, a lot of people would think is odd, where you're like, well, no, you're going to go up. And it's like, yeah, but I don't control who writes the line. Sometimes who writes the lineup isn't who should be in there. And there's like other factors involved. And so that was just something where I kind of tried to pivot into a mindset that I took, even when I was somewhere or in a circumstance where it wasn't as free and open and as communicated as such with Tampa.
Surviving Outside Sales podcast is brought to you by Rithm AI. If you are in outside sales, check out RhythmAI.com. That's RITHM AI.com. The sales enablement tool that will help outside sales teams build their best sales days every day. Rithm. Prospecting, targeting, and routing simplified. Everything an outside sales team needs, nothing it doesn't. Try for $1 for the first month today. That's RhythmAI.com. Now back to the show.
A couple quick questions. We're going to fire them off. First major league hit. Who were you with? Where was it? How did it feel?
It was a double to right center in Milwaukee. I forget the guy's name. He wasn't a big established guy. It was kind of a fourth, fifth starter.
Mm-hmm. Those with the Cubs?
Yep.
Okay. First home run.
Again, I forget the guy's name, but it was in Miami, the back end of a doubleheader. Nice. The old Pro Player Stadium or whatever.
Nice. What was your favorite moment of your career?
So probably game 163 in 2009. We had this play-in game against the Tigers, and it was just a fantastic game all the way around. I actually started on the bench, and they had to come in and pinch hit for a guy, and the game went back and forth. But for the playoffs in Minnesota, it was back in the Metrodome, so it was old football stadium. They had some seats blocked off, and so they opened those up, and so there was about 60,000 people there. And it was just an amazing environment, and we obviously ended up winning the game. And so just to be a part of that was just such an adrenaline rush. And then having the good game in the playoffs, later that year was probably a highlight. And then, but I would say a year before that, in 2008 in interleague play, we went to San Diego, and in back-to-back days, I hit home runs off Trevor Hoffman and Greg Maddux.
Oh, wow.
And
you went off Greg Maddux? Oh, yeah. Man. Yeah, that's awesome.
I got out in front of a changeup and kind of snuck one in over the field in San Diego. So
I'm sure
that was probably.
I'm sure he did not like that at all. Greg did not give up many home runs. Oh, of course. No, but he might. Greg Maddux seems like the kind of guy he would remember every single, if you ran up to him, I could see him. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I could see him. You walked up and you said, Brendan Harris, what team were you with? Minnesota Twins. And he was like, July 16th, I threw a changeup on a 2-1. Some of the memories of these guys in sports are incredible. I don't remember a lot of my playing days at all. Granted, I quote unquote retired, i.e. nobody wanted to pay me anymore when I was 24. So that was almost 20 years ago. So, it's starting to fade away, but that's really cool. So let's transition into what you're doing now, because this is the thing this is one of the reasons why I brought you on, was you're not just basking in the glow of a very successful baseball career. Because for those listening, it's beyond hard to play in the big leagues. And you see the guys that are Hall of Famers, I don't remember the stats, but it's something like 1% of all little leaguers end up playing in college. And then all of college players, and Brendan, correct me if you know the stat, it's like less than 1% play professional ball. And then of those guys, less than like 2% ever make the Hall of Fame or something like that. It's the sliver. And so Brendan is in the top 0.1% of baseball players ever to walk the planet. So that is excelling. No matter how long your career is, that is excelling at your craft. And then one day it's over. And so you have to quickly pivot and transition. And this happens a lot in people's sales careers where the company is sold. And so talk about the process where, okay, you got your degree, you knew you were going to do business afterwards. Talk about what the after part was, because with Surviving Outside Sales, we talk about 3 phases: get in, dominate, and then get out. The goal in sales is not to stay in sales your whole life. The goal is to get in, it's to learn, it's to network, it's to make money, dominate, cultivate skills that put you in the top. And then your goal is to get out and have the freedom to run a business or do what you want to do. Because just working for other people and being in sales is not for everybody. And that's what this community is about. So if you could walk through, you're done with baseball, you kind of decompress a little, and then it was like, all right, it's go time. What did you do? And what did that look like?
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to pursue something in business school. When back at William & Mary, I was in the process of, but I had left early and then went back, and I wasn't able to complete like a business major. So, but it had kind of whet my appetite a little for that. So I always thought, I never know I'd played 13 professional seasons, but after that was done, I was still kind of looking to play, kicking the tires, but I knew I wanted to go to business school. And so to your point, I initially was like, oh, where should I go? I could go to William & Mary. I could, I lived in the Northern Virginia area. I could go to Maryland. I could go to, Georgetown. And then once I really kind of stepped back and committed to it, I was like, no, I'm going to look at Wharton. I'm going to look at Columbia. I'm going to look at NYU, and just take a swing. I thought I had a compelling story. I had a good enough grades. But for Wharton, I had to take the GMAS, which is pain in the butt. And so, yeah, it was great. Actually, I had my interviewer was a William & Mary grad.
Oh, nice.
So I think that helped out. And so I ended up getting in. And for me, I thought, yes, I did play in the major leagues, but there are so many ex-players out there. What's going to differentiate yourself? What's going to, I wanted to kind of refresh my skill set, be aware of new options. I was I didn't know what I didn't know in terms of what options were out there relative to what my skill set would be. So I wanted to kind of expand the map in terms of that, and then, have something to differentiate myself from the hundreds of other ex players going out, because I want to start conversations with like, hey, I'm an ex blah blah blah. I want to start it with like, this is what I'm doing, this is what my firm does, this is what I do, and this is why I'm well suited for it, and then kind of circle back and say, hey, because I did this and this. I never wanted to have to lead conversations with like, oh, I'm a former this or I'm an ex that, which, and so yeah, so I ended up getting in, and it was a phenomenal experience in terms of the difficulty transitioning that a lot of players have. I literally, and so it's like in March when it started, and so the season ended, and then I go through all that, and then when I normally would be in spring training, I was just in an accounting class, so I didn't have any time to be like, getting my doors blown off. And so I didn't have the time to be like, oh, what's next? And I was okay with, I think I have a plan, but I want to go down these different rabbit holes to explore a couple of different options. I can work in baseball. I could be I think a quality front office candidate, but I didn't want to always have to be tied to baseball. And I wanted to be able to transfer my skill set. And I thought I could transfer my skill set to a couple different things. So I had a great experience in college and going back to college, and certainly different animal doing your MBA. And a big thing for me was networking and building relationships, but learning to network in the right way and just kind of doing things without expecting anything back. And then just meeting people, creating a network, but also finding mentors, right? In terms of in these things where I didn't have the experience. So there was a little bit of I had a couple of interesting things where I was doing presentations or speeches in school, and I was like, I got nervous, and I haven't been nervous to do anything in like 13 years. Like you get, after playing for so you certainly still get excited and you get a little butterflies, but then you have your process. I know what to expect. I know what's going to be, so, but on the flip side, not doing certain things, you hesitated for a little bit, and I was like, oh man, this is an interesting physiological reaction that I haven't had in 13 years. And so that was just, I was a little bit out of my element. And so that's what I would advise people to be, is be comfortable kind of getting a little bit out of your element, networking, building relationships, and finding mentors in some of these newer areas that maybe you have an idea of, you just don't have the requisite experience or network in to be able to excel in it. So, I ended up kind of getting my footing, and then it's the type of thing where, you get through, you find your footing, you start took me to year 2 to put up an A in one of the classes, which I don't apologize for. But then like you finish it and you're like ripping off you're like, you feel like Superman, you're like, all right, I finished, I survived. It wasn't that bad. I got a lot out of it. I have an expansive network now, and I can make a plan accordingly now. And I found this niche with, kind of connecting sports tech and innovation to end users. And in terms, I thought there was some phenomenal tech, some phenomenal data, or abilities to use data to kind of shorten the feedback loop, but I didn't think it was being adequately communicated to the end user as well, and or the needs of the end user being communicated vice versa to the tech and the engineers. So I started working with 76 Capital, it was a venture capital firm right there outside of Philly, and learned a lot there. Had a great experience there. Started working with one of their portfolio companies, Diamond Kinetics, kind of running their MLB stuff. And whether it was in learning it in school and learning it, working with them and helping to raise a fund and like screen things, and or then working for one of their portfolio companies and their MLB clients, I remember thinking like, man, we're either always negotiating or always selling. And people skills and the ability to connect with people are such an invaluable thing, valuable and transferable skill set. So there's discounted cash flow analysis and modeling that like you can do and everybody can do. And inevitably, if you get to some job, they're going to have somebody who can just dominate that. So you don't need to be able to do that. And a lot of ways they're running algorithms now that can do it anyway. And it's automated. Mm-hmm. But the ability to connect with people, the ability to communicate value, whether it's you or their product, and then build that trust and that, kind of symmetry, I thought was one of the more invaluable lessons and skill sets that I learned later in my career.
No, it's so true. And I agree with everything you said. First of all, we're always selling. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're always selling. It's people think, oh, well, I'm not in sales. Everyone is in sales. When you're negotiating, when you're trying to get somebody to go on a date with you, if you're trying to get your buddies to do something you want to do, you're convincing, you're influencing people, you're nudging people to do certain activities, think a certain way, say something So everybody is in sales, but some of the things I really love what you said, which we really preach about in our community, is first of all, doing things without expecting anything. I think one of the drawbacks now in the business world, I've seen it a lot, is, people always think, well, what am I going to get out of this? Well, sometimes just doing selfless things is a very important thing. In fact, I saw on LinkedIn probably about 6 weeks ago, some guy was like, hey, if anybody can help me, and knows of a position, I'm in Indiana, please let me know. I saw a position like a week later in Indiana, and I sent it to him. I don't know yet if you guys gotten the job, but this is like 2 weeks ago. He was like, thank you. I don't know this guy. I connected with him only after somebody in my network shared his story. And everybody celebrates when you get a job. Nobody celebrates when you start a business. Everybody says thoughts and prayers when something bad happens to you, but how many people are willing to help? Or, hey, my post got a lot of reshares and likes and comments. We're thinking about you. We're praying about you, but who's going to offer me a job or open doors? And so sometimes you have to do them yourself, but I didn't expect anything out of this. I just thought, okay, my mind clicked. He said Indiana. This post says Indiana. I'm just going to send it to him. And I didn't expect anything out of there. So when you said that, it was like, yes, that's a great mindset to have. I think that's an excelling mindset. It's not a limiting mindset. Another thing too is get a mentor. I did not realize the power of mentorships till about 10 years ago. So I was really late to the game. So if you're listening to this, find a mentor. Like Brendan said, if you want to get to a certain industry, find that company and ask them, hey, can I intern? Can I shadow you? Don't expect anything. They're not going to give you anything. They don't know you. But if you're willing to give and not expect anything back, and you want to learn the ropes and get great experience and start to build your network within there, that's a fantastic idea. And then again, the networking. I mean, you've got to network. I did not focus on my networking. I thought my networking was going out and partying on the weekends, quite frankly, when I was younger. Like, that's what I thought networking was. Oh yeah, we went to happy hour and I met this guy who knows this, knows that. No, that's not really true networking. So, so X10 Capital, what are you guys doing with X10 Capital? Is there anything you want the audience to know about what you're currently doing?
Yeah, we securitize interest in professional athletes. So we essentially invest in them at early stage of their careers for a percentage of future earnings. So they sell us equity. We invest in major league guys. So it's more private equity. It's not venture, minor league guys. And we wait till they break through the major leagues, and we feel like we can put them in a comp set and of guys in their position, their age, their production, and kind of project out, future cash flows. And then, try to do a deal, give them financial security, give them leverage. It's very common in Major League Baseball is these small mid-market teams to extend these guys to below market deals early in their careers, because these guys make nothing in the minors or have, come from nothing. And so it's $25 million is tough to turn down. But if we, invest a few $1 million in them, give them financial security, they accrue the service time, get to free agency. That 5 for 20, 5 for 25 becomes 5 for 85. Now we're, talking generational wealth. So, that's our thing. And we, it's a great business, a great company, great GPs, great coworkers. And it's fun to be in something where we can explain to guys, hey, our incentives are uniquely aligned, where we want you to play as long as you want and be compensated as well as you want. No major league team's ever going to come to a guy and say, hey, this is the plan for you to get to free agency and really freaking take us to the bank. So it's been good. And, we work with them. It's as most of us are former players within the baseball unit. And, we explain to them, it's like, it's hard to get 10 years in, it's really hard. And so things are going to change, how the league pitches you or approaches you is going to change. Your body's going to change. How your recovery is going to change significantly as you age. You're going to have to adjust your training. So all these areas of performance, I feel like that we've put together in one of the best networks in the industry, leaders to be able to bring to these guys, to put a team around them so that whatever it is, whatever area of performance that we can help them, support them in.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're going to put the show notes. How can people follow X10 Capital? Or if anybody is listening to this and they think, what I'm doing right now is not what I want to do, but I want to do something like this. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, and put those links in the bio, and shoot me a message.
Awesome. Well, so last thing, and then I'm going to let you go. And this has been great catching up and hearing more about what you're doing. So this is the 20-year anniversary of William & Mary winning the conference championship in 2001. We did get to the top of which celebration was more exciting? The Tribe celebration beating JMU, or when the Twins beat the Tigers on game 163?
Well, there were more people at the Twins one, but
yeah.
I mean, they were, listen, at the time, it was unbelievable when the Tribe won. I mean, we'd been doormats for a while, and just so, you know, I obviously remember them both like very fondly, and you know, light-haired first baseman catching that foul ball to win it, and
Yeah.
it was funny. It was that's remember. I can remember I was over at short, and like I thought the ball was out of play, and then like I remember seeing you kind of get your steps, and I'm like, oh, dang, he's got it. And, you know, because we actually had played very, very well throughout that tournament. And that day, we didn't really play that. We just kind of snuck through that game. And so it was this mix of joy and relief, because we really had, I know I didn't swing it well that day at all in the doubleheader. So it was a real relief and phenomenal party on the way back.
Yeah, it was, you know, it's funny. I still have that ball somewhere. I don't know. My baseball stuff has been buried. It's been a while, but we played horrible that day. So for the listeners, we were cruising through the conference tournament that year, and we went up against JMU in the championship game, and we lost the first game, and it was televised. And my grandmother thought we had lost the championship because game 2 was not televised, just game 1. And so it was a double elimination because we were in the winner's bracket. And so game 1, I think I was like 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. And then second game, I had a good game. I remember Greg Miller was up to bat, and coach called a timeout. Tying run was on second base. And Chris Ray, who went to pitch in the big leagues with the Orioles and the San Francisco Giants, was our freshman closer. And I'm a senior. I'm 22 years old. I've been grizzled through 6 a.m. runs and stadium steps and going 3-18 in the conference. And here he is as a freshman. We're blazing through the tournament, and he gets on the mound, and I was like, you got this? And he looks at me, because it was me. I think it was Trey Wakefield, Kirby, the catcher, coach, and Chris Ray. I looked at him. I said, you got this? And he didn't even flinch. He goes, I got this. It was almost like Jimmy Chitwood in Hoosiers. And Chris Ray threw a high fastball. I don't remember the count, but he threw a high fastball, and Greg Miller popped it up. And from the first base angle, it almost went straight up. So I knew it wasn't going foul. Like your vantage point was obviously different, but I knew it was going up. And as soon as he hit it up, I could tell by the way that he hit it, the trajectory. I was like, I got it. I did kind of like float over probably midway between the first base bag and the fence. And I remember just drifting over, and the ball got to its apex, and it's starting to come down. And I'm not kidding. My thought was, where are we going to go after the game? It was one of those things where I was thinking it, but it wasn't active. It was passive. And then the ball came down, and it was the softest baseball I'd ever caught in my life. It was like a pillow, almost like I had a magnet in my glove. And then the hysteria, like we didn't even know how to celebrate. Like it was just, we were running around like, what do we do? That was fun. So I think about it every time I see a sports team celebrate. So whether it's at the Super Bowl or NBA finals or even college or whatever, I just remember the joy, like that, it brings that up. But yeah, so those are some good times. Well, Brendan, I really do appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for being on the Surviving Outside Sales podcast. All of Brendan's contact information is going to be in our show notes. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks for having me.